parents and guardians, and welcome to our Back to School Night video for 2021-2022 for Mr. Sansonetti. First, I would like to introduce myself and tell you a little bit about me. Then I'll explain the courses that your students could be in. First, I am from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I graduated with a bachelor's degree in middle school mathematics from IUP. I recently graduated last year from George Mason, and I have received my master's in educational leadership. This is my 7th year here teaching at JML, and I really enjoy watching sports, skiing, and movies. Now I'm going to go through 2 different courses here because I teach 2 different courses. The first one I'm going to talk about is Foundations of Algebra. If your student is not in Foundations of Algebra, feel free to skip forward a little bit until I get to the pre-algebra aspect. It'll only be 1 slide, so it should go quickly. What you see right here, and this is also posted in my Schoology page if you look at our 9-week plan, is what our plan is according to the county for foundations this year, which standards we will be covering, and what units we'll be looking at. So you can see that quarter 1 right now, we are looking on applying rational numbers, and our standards of learning will be 7.1 and 7.2. And while that doesn't seem like, hey, there's only 2 standards here, and I see down low there's a bunch of standards in some of these other units, some of these standards have multiple points to them, like they have 7.1a, 7.1b, 7.1b, c. So some of these, even though it only looks like it's 2 standards we're covering, there's actually many tests we're actually addressing when we're going through and doing these standards. But as you can see, we're going to start off with applying rational numbers. As we enter second quarter, now is when we start solving expressions, equations, and inequalities, followed by using proportions and working on functions. As we head into quarter 3, we're going to continue working on proportions, functions, things like slope, building off of that. Before we get the end of quarter 3, where we'll be working with data, looking at histograms, talking about probability. We'll do some scatter plots. And finally, in quarter 4, we'll be working on 2D and 3-dimensional geometry, finding area, finding volume, finding surface area, things like that. And while it doesn't show on here, we really try to chunk off a big piece of this quarter 4 for our SOL prep to make sure we're getting ready for this test. Now in pre-algebra, and once again, if you're a foundations parent or guardian, feel free to skip ahead till I get to the next slide of materials. And for pre-algebra, we are also going to start with applying real numbers. And you could see that we move then into solving algebraic expressions. We move into it a little bit quicker than we did last year, just because we know students are already familiar with it and they're ready to build off of that. However, we continue that into second quarter. So part of it will be in quarter 1, part of it's in quarter 2, before we then get into functions, working with slope, working with graphing inequalities, all that fun stuff. In quarter 3 is where we really start putting in more of the geometry aspects, where we're measuring angles, we're learning about Pythagorean's theorem, before we go ahead and start working on composite shapes such as area, perimeter, and then onto 3-dimensional shapes like volume and surface area. Finally, we finish off the quarter 4 with learning about probability. And unlike in foundations, we dive a little bit deeper and we teach about independent and dependent events before we move on to finally looking at data, interpreting box plots, interpreting scatter plots, and also reviewing for our SOL. Now, here's what our students need for this course, and it's important that we bring these every single day. Every student should have a 3-ring binder. A folder would work also, as long as there's a way for them to store their paper and they're cleaning it out all the time. And in those binders, I'm going to ask that students keep their notes, their study guides, and their tests. Now, for whatever reason, if you ever lose your notes, you ever lose your study guide, I have these posted both blank and with a key online on both the notes and the study guides. Students can also watch my video notes by going into our Schoology page and opening up our Ed Puzzle link. That's at the very top of our page in everyone's Schoology page, and it clearly says Ed Puzzle class link. So while they could always find the notes in our different folders, if they also want to watch the video to go back and review it, they could simply go into that Ed Puzzle videos and watch the videos. A big thing that a lot of people overlook is pencils. A lot of students have been coming to school without pencils, without anything to write with. And that does add and take away time from our class. It does cause a quick distraction. And sometimes we are out of pencils if I give up all my pencils for the day. So please, please, please make sure your student has a bunch of pencils that they're coming to school with, so it's just not one more thing that kind of distracts us as we start our lesson. Another thing I'm going to ask students to bring is their Chromebook and laptop every day. This is important for math because we have to use the Chromebook and laptop as our calculator. On the SOL, students use the Desmos calculator, and it's important that we practice using that calculator in class so when it is time for students to take the SOL, they're familiar with it already. You can always access the SOL Desmos calculator at home via LCPS Go. And if you just go to LCPS Go and search Desmos calculator, it is one of the first things you'll see pop up. Now, homework. Homework is very interesting in class, but it's also something the students like how we do it. So first, there should be homework every night. Every night, expect that I'm going to assign something. However, I will always give students time in class to work on it. And most of the time, I'll always give them time to actually finish it in class. I wouldn't want students after being in school all day for 6 to 8 hours, then having to go home and do another 3 hours of homework. When they're in class, I will assign them homework. I will work with them to complete it. I'll answer any questions. And most of the time, we're going to get it completely finished. Now, if they don't get it finished, they obviously can finish at home when it's due the next class. But hopefully, it's only going to be 3 to 4 problems, nothing that takes tons of time. Now, I always have my notes, my homeworks posted in Schoology. Most of the time, it's just going to be a formative or it'll be a study guide or something that's going to either prepare us for the test or provide me with data. If students don't complete their homework, what I'll do is the next day in class, I'll pull them and I'll work with them in a small group to finish it and make sure they understand it. If it's something that we just don't have enough time to address in class, I may make them come to laws once we have laws opening, and that's a time during lunch when they can work on their work. Now, we don't have laws open yet in the middle school because we're still figuring it out now as we come back from COVID. But later on this year, we'll have it. But most of the time, we'll be finishing our homework in class with me if they need it. If they forgot to do it, the next day I'll simply pull them and I'll say, hey, here's what you had to do, and I'll help them catch up. Now, if the student misses 1 homework, 2 homeworks, that's not a big deal. I may not reach out right away unless it's for a summative grade. However, if there's a pattern developing and homework is not being completed on a regular basis, I will 100% call or email you and let you know about it. And we'll try to find a way to work together to kind of come up with a creative solution so we can make sure the work is getting completed. Now, if we look at assessments, assessments are going to be the same as they pretty much are in every class. We do have formatives. I give a formative almost every single day in class. And this is data that I use to really guide my instruction. My entire lesson is built off of personalized learning, the idea that all students learn differently, and I use data to determine how I teach students. I use data and evidence to say, all right, this is what my students need, and this is how I will best support them. And then I'll differentiate our activities or maybe the practice we do based off those formatives. So formatives are really important to me. We'll do a formative, like I said, every single day in class. Now, we always have one common formative. And the common formative is a formative that every student will take the class before our big test. And then you'll see me post that in Schoology so that you could see it. And then students know, hey, do I need to prepare a little bit more for my test next class, or am I ready to go right now? Now we have summatives. Summatives will count for 100% of your points in this class. Now we will be doing unit tests, quizzes, and we'll have some projects this year, a little bit at all. But realize we will work with your students to be prepared for the summatives. A big thing is that I always tell my students, if you come into class and you are not ready for the test that day, you're just unprepared, students are allowed to reach out to me. Students can say, hey, I need more help. And before we take this test, we will sit down and practice when everyone else gets started. And then when they're ready, they can take the test. So that's an important thing I always try to communicate. If you have any questions about summatives or formatives or how we do things, feel free to reach out to me. The one big rule that we have on both summatives and formatives is that I will not accept any tests or anything unless they're showing their work. In math is a very evidence-based class, and it's important to demonstrate how you got to your answers. So I will not be accepting work unless students show how they solved each step, unless they show me everything they've done. Now, obviously, I'll be there to help them out if they have trouble figuring out how to solve it. I can obviously go back and work with them and talk to them, but it is very important that they're showing their work, they're writing it down somewhere, paper and pencil, and that way we could kind of follow along and they can prove how they got these answers and prove that they understand this concept. Now for retakes. So retakes work. If the student scores above an 80%, they are unfortunately not able to take a retake. The highest score you could get on a retake is 80%. So if they scored above that, there's no way to improve their grade. So they couldn't take a retake. Obviously, if they want to do extra practice, I will continue to give them practice. I just can't change that grade. Now, the student scores between 70 and 80%. it's up to them if they'd like to take a retake. And all I ask my students to do is just come and tell me. Either you can email me, they can email me, or if they even come up in class and say, hey, Mr. Sansonetti, can I do a retake on this? I'm going to tell them absolutely every time. I'm not going to make it hard for someone. If someone wants to do extra work and continue to practice, I'm going to be there to allow them to do that. And I'll support them in class as if they were taking a normal retake. Now, if your student scores below a 70%, they have a mandatory retake. If this is something that happens multiple times, we see a pattern, this is something else I will definitely be reaching out about. Maybe if you have 2 retakes back to back, that's when I'll reach out to home and say, hey, these last few tests have been a little bit more difficult. Is there something we can do better to improve? But if they have to take this mandatory retake, what it will look like is this. I will first pull them in class and we'll go through their test and show them where they made mistakes and how they can fix it. The next class we have together, I'll do another practice with them and have them do an activity. And then the following class, they will go ahead and take their test. So it normally takes about 3 classes to go ahead and take your retake after we've taken the test. But that all depends on the content. If students need more time, obviously we could spend more time practicing. If a student maybe understands it right after reviewing with me and they're 100% ready, then they can take the retake right then. It all depends on the student, but generally it's about 3 times. Now, discipline is an issue we always like to talk about, but this is something that hopefully is not an issue this year. Most of the time, this is stuff that I like to solve in class, and if there is an issue, I'll talk to you about it. But here's how it works in our class. The first thing that would happen is I give a very clear verbal warning. I tell the students why they did something that bothered me, and I'll explain to them why I didn't like it. The second time, that will be more when I pull a student out of class. Maybe I talk to them in private either during the class or after class and kind of just understand what's going on, where are they coming from, why is this happening, is there something more at play? And from there, that either will be the end of it, or maybe we'll have to have a parent conversation. We could talk together, parents and guardians, figure out what's going on. Is there ways we could address this at home, or are there ways that we could put our heads together and address this as a team? Now, finally, this third infraction, this isn't something I have to do often, and this is something I will only do after I've already spoken to you, or if something is extremely serious. But if I have spoken to you multiple times, or if an issue I believe is super serious, it is something that we don't want to take lightly, that's when I'll go ahead and refer them right to the dean. But about 95% of the time, we'll have this conversation first between us and the guardians and the parents, and we'll solve it together, and hopefully it never has to get to that aspect. Finally, some important resources that you need to know about for this class. Students are really, I highly encourage any student to come talk to me for help, and this goes for both students and parents. If you want your student to get extra help, all you have to do is send me an email. I will either come before school, after school, we'll make an appointment, and we'll figure out what time we could meet together and work and practice this. Unfortunately, I only have 1 planning block this year, so I don't have much flexibility of going into resources to help students. But this is something I definitely will make time in class to meet with students. I'll make time before class, after class. If you reach out to me and you send me an email or your student talks to me, we will find a game plan to help give your student extra support and help them where they need best. Calculators, as I talked about before, we will be using the Desmos calculator all year long, just because that's the calculator students use on the SOL, and I want them to be prepared for when they take it. The final 2 pieces of information, which are pretty interesting, is that our school has access to both Dreambox and IXL. Now, they both are very good tools, but they're good for different things. Dreambox is great for not having a teacher help you or not learning a specific topic. Dreambox helps you grow in math overall, where the student gets to pick what they want to learn. They're given options from Dreambox, and Dreambox says, hey, here's 6 topics that we think you're ready to learn, and then the student has a choice. So Dreambox really helps the student become an overall better math student. IXL is good for really preparing for a test or learning a specific skill. As an example, if we have a test on order of operations next class, I would recommend going into IXL, picking a correct strand and practicing that specific strand, practicing order of operations, where Dreambox will get you prepared for kind of an overall umbrella of all things math. Now, to access both Dreambox and IXL, all students need to do is log into LCPS Go and click on the Dreambox app or the IXL app, and that's it. It will log it in for them once they get through LCPS Go. Now, the final 3 things we're going to talk about is parental support. Please make sure you're checking Schoology. Please make sure you're checking the math binder. And if you have questions, do not hesitate to reach out at all. I am super accessible. If you email me, I'll normally email you back right away, or I'll email you the next morning. But I will always get back to you, make a plan, and help you with whatever you need. So please, if you are concerned, if you want your student to get some extra support somehow, reach out to me. We will come up with a game plan. I am here to help you. The final thing I'm going to say is best ways to contact me. Best way is email. Now, like I said, I only have one planning. So if you email me during the day, it's probably going to take until 3:45 till the day ends or until I have lunch so I can send the email back. But I will always respond, within 24 hours. If you'd like to have a conference, please just make sure you can email me, but just make sure you're CCing the guidance counselors in it. Anytime we have a parent-teacher conference in person, we always want to let the guidance counselors know just so they know what's going on. Some important things that you could see now online in our Schoology page is if you go into our Schoology page, you can see all of our summatives posted on our 9-week plan or on our calendar. And you'll also see me post all our notes and homework for there. So there's no way that if a student forgets their stuff at home or they forget their stuff at school, they still have access to the most important documents when they're at home that night so they can prepare. Now, I look forward to an excellent school year with all your students. I look forward to meeting and talking with all of you more. Thank you for listening to my video, and if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you very much, and have a great day.